Okay. I'd like to call the regular council meeting of Monday, June 27th to order. We are honored to gather on the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation. Approval of the agenda with the approval of the agenda.
Move agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
With the removal, sorry.
With your removal of that item 6.1.
Oh, with the
Financial.
removal of 6.1 in the Sophie report.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Next, minutes.
Oh, sorry.
Minutes.
Move receipt, sorry. Second.
All in favor? Carried. Next, committee minutes.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. No delegations, no unfinished business, correspondence. That council received the correspondence from Jesse Kettler, Chair of the Comox Valley Regional District Board regarding automotive service stations. Councillor, would you like to speak on that?
Yeah, thanks so much. So this is something that was brought through our Electoral Areas Service Commission. Director Arbor had put it forward that in order to support some of the initiatives from the federal and provincial government moving toward EV sales. So the 2035 target for the province is that all light-duty vehicles will be EV sold in the province at that time, and for the federal government, they're shooting for 2040, I believe, for all light-duty vehicles being sold in the country being EVs. So the thinking is that we wouldn't want to be putting any more petroleum-based infrastructure into the valley. So it was asked that we consider the report that was put forward at the Electoral Areas Service Committee at each of the municipalities to see if that was something that we would support. And it would be, I think for ours, our staff would obviously have to look at it, but a zoning change that would just take out that the fact that the stations could have petroleum sales. They could still have the other services that fueling stations provide, but they would not be allowed to add anything to their infrastructure in terms of more fuel tanks. They'd be able to maintain those tanks, so we're not asking anybody to close their gas stations. Maybe that would help them move toward other forms of fuel, maybe hydrogen or again electric vehicle plug-ins. And if they did want to put in a gas station somewhere, say in our interchange lands or something, then they would have to apply for rezoning. Then it would have to go through a public process. So there would have to be community input to allow them to do that. So those are the types of changes that we're looking at, and just wanted council to be aware of that and for staff to have some input.
Okay. Any questions, Councillor Sproul?
When we were dealing with Trilogy back in 2008, initially, many of the zonings going down to Courtney, the gas stations were allowed, and it really troubled me. But I can't remember why we couldn't just ban it. But I guess we didn't have enough. It was so long ago. But that's along the parkway. It's all wetlands. It's from Comox Lake, seeps under to Maple Lake, comes out, there's a sort of a shelf, and then it goes to Happy Valley. So one broken tank could pollute the whole of Happy Valley and all their water supplies.
Yeah,
so
that's also part of the thinking, is that the infrastructure that gets left behind, it's basically a brownfield, right? And so that's difficult for municipalities to have to deal with as well. So this initiative is being looked at in a lot of different places in the U.S. And we actually, because of our participation through the regional district, we were highlighted in an article in The Guardian this week on this. So, yeah, it's good.
Councillor Brown?
No questions. Happy to support this.
I too, I think it's a way for the future, and it doesn't make any sense to add more gas stations along the roads. I think you'll see, it depends on what comes about, but I think you'll see some of them actually disappear. Okay, so there is a motion there on the table.
Yeah, so the recommendation is just for it to be referred back to staff so that they can have a look, and then maybe when they bring it back and we look at it further, we could have it go to our OCP process next year.
Are you making that a motion?
Well, I'm just having it go to staff. Yeah.
Okay. Seconder?
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Thanks.
Next, recommend that council receive the development and development variance permit application 2727 Allen Avenue report.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. So the village received an application for a residential infill development permit to allow the construction of a new accessory dwelling unit, ADU, at 2727 Allen Avenue. The purpose of this report is to seek a council decision. So the development and development variance permit application for Allen is back before you after being referred to the Advisory Planning Commission. The commission recommended approval for both the variance and the development permit, or development variant permit. So the application and supporting documents meet all of the residential infill development permit guidelines and zoning bylaw requirements, except for the maximum permitted GFA percentage and the use of the building materials that reflect the character of the principal dwelling. As the existing single-family dwelling is planned to be replaced in the future, it's not practical to have the ADU reflect the character of this principal building. The property owner intends to have a new primary dwelling unit that will complement the aesthetics of the ADU. So the applicant is also proposing, or not also, the applicant is proposing to vary the maximum GFA of the ADU as a percentage of the GFA of the single-family dwelling from 75% to 91%. This would result in an ADU of 89.4 meters squared, which is still within the permitted maximum GFA of 90 meters squared. The relatively small floor area of the existing dwelling, which is 98 meters squared, hinders the ability to construct an ADU of the desired size. The existing dwelling would need to only be 22.7 meters squared larger for the ADU to be compliant with the GFA percentage requirement. This additional GFA could easily be accomplished within current setbacks, lot coverage, and permitted height. Staff recommendation is approval of both the development permit and the development variance permit.
Questions from members of council? We'll start with Councillor Brown.
Thanks for this. I'm not sure this is a question, but I am concerned that we are approving an ADU on a lot with a derelict house, with no plan for future development of the property, no official plan. Clearly they say they're planning to do it, but we don't have any control over whether or not they do. And so I have some concern around that. I would much rather see a proposal for the entirety of the property, given that there are large trees on the property, and there may well be an ability to preserve those trees if we looked at the house and the ADU at the same time, and moving the house one way or another in order to do that. But we don't have that opportunity right now, because if we approve the ADU, the trees will be gone and then there's nothing to be done. So yeah, just I'm not sure what we need to do in order to rectify that process. I think it's inappropriate to approve an accessory dwelling unit when there's no primary dwelling to speak of, since it's being demolished. And my second concern is that the house was built in 1933, and so deconstruction could be possible, and hopefully we're suggesting that, even though we don't have a bylaw that requires it, so that anything that's of value in there could be recovered. Yeah, I just think with site adaptive planning in our OCP, we should be looking at the entirety of the property when we're siting buildings, so that we know what the the actual impact is before we give a variance on something that doesn't even have a primary dwelling to refer it.
I would just mention that the primary dwelling there is a primary dwelling on the site, even though it is planned to be replaced at some point. But the accessory dwelling unit is technically still accessory. The variance is the floor area, the percentage of the floor area, not the maximum floor area. Did look at the trees, but unfortunately we don't have the tree bylaw. We can't require people to keep trees on their property at this point. And we also can't regulate the design of single-family homes. So I think, unfortunately, we are in a position where we have to look at it separately still.
Right, but so if someone was applying to have an ADU with a primary dwelling that was actually performing as a primary dwelling, we would see the layout of the entire lot. And that's part of the consideration that council goes through. When we look at something, we look at the relationship to the other building and what that's going to look like. And right now, it's essentially, even though there is a derelict building, so it's not a dwelling, it's a derelict building, and it has been derelict for 4 years. So there's no point in comparing it to that building because the plan is to tear it down. So what are we comparing? What context is it in, right? That's my...
There is definitely some unknowns. The applicant could choose to keep the house. We don't know. They could sell the property before, replacing it, and it could be renovated. It's an unknown. So I think staff looks at the ADU, according to the ADU guidelines, and then just the variance for the GFA of that percentage with the existing house on the property. Yeah.
Thanks.
Councillor Sproul?
Well, I concur with Councillor Brown. I'm still rather confused. I'd rather have a 3D picture of it, but the neighbours are saying there's going to be a parking lot in the middle. What is that meant?
No, well, the parking is already there. The parking's not changing for the property. I know that there was somebody that wrote in with concerns about that, but the parking has been behind the primary dwelling since however long the house has been there, as far as I know, since there's been cars to park behind there. Because the house is set quite close to the street, I believe, to the property line. Not the street, but the property line.
But just driving by, it doesn't look like a very deep lot. There's sort of a little, not cliff, but a drop down to the Wellington Colliery Railway. And I'm not, I can't express in words my concerns about this. I don't see that it's going to be a big improvement on the property to have a derelict house. So why, you're only second guessing, but why do you think the owners, the proponents, are not going to build the house first and then put the ADU in?
It's partly just due to the practicality of building, so it's less disruptive to build the house at the back first and then remove the house at the front. Additionally, they mentioned that they wanted to build the ADU. It's less expensive than building a new single family, put tenants in, and then do the second house. Yeah.
Thank you.
But yeah, those are a couple of the things that they mentioned.
But have we had that kind of request before with ADUs to build it before the house was built?
Well, there is a house there now.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
But I don't really count it as a house because nobody lives there or will be able to until it's fixed.
Yeah. It does meet our definition of a dwelling on a property. Whether somebody lives there or not, it still counts.
Should we put in the writing habitable, perhaps? There has to be some way, because this is not a normal situation.
Yeah.
It's concerning.
Councillor Kettler?
Did you want to speak, Courtney?
If it's helpful, I thought I would mention that there was another situation. I think it was before our time, but there was another property where I think council approved a variance to the size of a dwelling to make the dwelling an ADU. And that was the only dwelling on the property at the time, so that then a larger house could be built elsewhere on the property. So that was another
There's two of those on
two of
Cumberland
those
Road.
situations that
Two
happened
of
sometime
those.
in the last several years. So just to answer the question if I've seen this before.
Yeah.
So my issue with it is that, we have certain justifications, land use justifications for the development variance permit. And, the first one, the ability to use or develop the property is unreasonably constrained or hindered by having to comply with the bylaw requirement. And I don't feel that it is unreasonably constrained. I think that they can build the dwelling and they can increase density, they can have infill there, and I don't feel like it is unreasonable to meet those requirements. So yeah, that's why I'm not really sure about how to move forward with this either, because they don't really require the variance. It's more about maximizing their value, I guess the profit, which is not council's purview or requirement to do that. Yeah, I'm on the fence on this one. Thanks.
I can speak, the architect spoke to that at the Advisory Planning Commission, that it's just with the bedroom size, I think it's possible to shave off 2 feet from each bedroom, like along that side. He said it was just about making a more comfortable living space. I think it's like an 8-foot bedroom to a 10-foot bedroom, was part of the sort of, what's the word? What some of the reasoning why.
Right. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Brown?
So it looks like the I can't tell how much from the drawings, but that the ADU is actually sited on that slope to some extent. So what is the setback? Like, it's hard to know when you're on the path what that actual setback to the property line is, and then where from the property line then is the setback, if any sense of like the difference, the distance between the pathway and the actual building?
Yeah, so the one corner where the stairs come down, I think the concrete pad projects slightly into the setback, which is permitted as per the zoning bylaw. But it's 1.5 meters at the, I believe, southwest corner. And then the other corner, the southeast corner, is quite a bit further back because the property is like a pizza shape, sort of. Or it slants down. It's a weird shape at the back. So on one side of the house, it's quite a bit further back, and then on one, it meets the setback requirement of the 1.5 meters.
Okay. Did you want anything further? No. Okay. My concern is that, and I read the letters from the neighborhood, and they're concerned about the house that's not built yet, it's going to look like and how it's going to fit into the neighborhood. And I think this is just not about this house, this is about a lot of the houses in the village. And I have a grave concern that we're losing the heritage feel of the community by development. I have no problems with development, and I have no problems with additions to houses, but I'm really concerned that we're losing a lot of the character in our community. And this is a slow process. And yes, we granted those other two, but they weren't so situated inside the village. The one was on the way into the community by the Gas and Go, and I can't remember where the other one was.
Across the street.
Yeah, and so that doesn't have as direct an impact on the neighbors around them as this area here. So I don't understand why she couldn't put forward what she plans to build on the front if she already has an idea of what it would be. Look, I think it's more to ease the neighborhood and let them feel like she is listening to the neighborhood and their feelings, because you don't want to start a neighborhood disagreement before you move in, I would hope. And so I think there needs to be a little bit of give and take here. Yes, Councillor Brown.
I think the other concern that struck me is, should the ADU be built first, then whoever decides, presuming that the owner would then rent that space, and it would have to be a long-term rental because there's only one building, or because there would be no principal resident. Then that person then gets to live with the demolition of the other building, live through that demolition and or deconstruction and rebuild. At least if there was a plan registered with the village, that person then could look and see what the plan was for the property before they sign a lease to rent the ADU, or, it just gives a sense of what is coming.
Yeah, we just don't have any bylaw to require that. We
Yeah.
cannot tell people what their houses look like, single family anyway.
Yeah.
Also, we can't accept building plans unless they're going to start building right away. Otherwise, they pay the application and it expires within 2 months if they don't start building, or it is considered abandoned after a certain period of time without inspections. So we wouldn't want to put them in that situation either.
Right, so then could we ask for the drawing, but I guess, I'm not sure what the process is. If we go back to the developer and say, can you please show us what you're going to do with the site, or whatever, that council's not comfortable giving this variance without seeing what the rest of the site looks like, does that have to be a submission of the official building plan, or could it just be
We just don't have a mechanism to ask
to
for that.
do that?
No.
Yeah.
Yep. Could I? Just to clarify, even if they did offer it, we have no way of holding them to it.
Yeah.
Absolutely no way when it's a single family building. They could change their minds, and we wouldn't even recommend asking for it, because that could give a false sense of comfort to the community, because we have no way of holding them to it. So it just has to be, council would need to be feel comfortable without that information.
Right.
Just one more thing.
Yes.
The maximum GFA, the variance, that's a huge change in floor area, 75% to 91%. But again, we probably don't have justification for saying no because of the large variance being asked for. Isn't that quite a lot more in a small house?
Sorry, I'm not exactly clear on the question.
At the bottom of page 27.
27,
Yeah,
okay.
they want to vary the maximum GFA of the ADU as a percentage of the single-family dwelling from 75% to 91%. But it's not a single-family, well, it is, but it's not going to be, it's...
Of the
Ultimately-
existing single-family dwelling on the property. Yeah, so so the ADU has to be 75% of the single-family home on the property. And so they're asking to vary from 75% to 91 because the existing house is quite small. And then they do hope to replace the existing house with something. It would only have to be 200 square feet larger for the ADU to be in compliance. Or they could put an addition on the existing house, which they wouldn't do because it's not in great condition, but that would also make the ADU in compliance. So, but they don't want to put an addition on the house just because of the state it's in, I believe. That's not their vision.
It just seems, I'm just imagining the neighbors across the street looking at a derelict house and another one coming up, another new one. It just, I can understand concerns of the neighborhood. That's all I can say.
Okay, what is your pleasure, council? I think we've had a good discussion.
It doesn't sound like there's one of the alternatives is to request further information, but it doesn't sound like we have a way of sort of getting that information or holding them to it if we did get it. So that only really leaves us with a denial, I guess. So I'll move that council deny the development variance permit on the property described as Lot 5, District Lot 21, Nelson District Plan 14377, 2727 Allen Ave.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Sorry, just for clarification, with the development permit, is that separate? Can council request the plan be changed, or is the development permit denied as well? Just for clarification before we move on.
That, because they can still, if they do not request the variance, they can still develop the property.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's-
Sorry, I guess just do they have to reapply for development permit then? I just want to be really clear when I
Yeah,
move on
what
from
you're
this, so.
Thank you. Right, so because our bylaw,
They're separate applications.
separate applications. Okay, so the variance is denied, but the development permit is just still open, I think, if my understanding. And then you may see a revision to the development permit application. So no decision was made on the development permit today, only the variance.
Just
Is
the
that
variance,
correct? Okay.
yeah.
Because it's not even on the agenda, right?
Yeah, I just wanted clarification for the motion.
Totally.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thank you.
Next, that council received the development variance permit 2688 Penrith Avenue report.
Every seat.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
All right, so the village has received an application for a development variance permit to vary the minimum required parking spaces for daycare use in the Public Assembly Institutional Zone, PA1. The purpose of this report is to request a referral to the next meeting of the Advisory Planning Commission. The applicant currently runs a provincially licensed outdoor group childcare program that uses the Cumberland United Church or Weir Church at 2688 Penrith as a drop-off and pick-up location. The outdoor daycare accommodates 20 children ages 2.5 to 5 years old and employs 4 daycare workers. The applicant would like to transition to using space within the existing building to allow for indoor daycare full-time in addition to the outdoor program. To comply with the zoning bylaw, the applicant needs to meet the required parking requirements for the intended use or pay cash in lieu at a cost of $3,800 per space. The applicant has proposed to provide 1 on-site parking space at the rear of the property and has requested to vary the remaining 4. Varying the required number of parking for on-site spaces from 5 to 1 would allow for the applicant to offer more daycare spaces. A payment of $3,800 per parking space would total $15,200, which is cost prohibitive for the daycare applicant. The proposed daycare is located in the historic Cumberland United Church, which was built in 1895. And at the time was obviously not designed to accommodate large numbers of on-site parking spaces, making it challenging for the current uses to meet parking requirements. Additionally, the Community Care and Assisted Living Act requires daycare licensees to provide at least 6 meters squared of outdoor play area for each child. Varying the required number of on-site parking spaces could be considered a benefit to the community as it allows for additional childcare spaces. Staff don't identify any aesthetic or environmental impacts from the proposed variance. A potential functional impact is traffic congestion at pickup and drop-off times, but it generally disperses rather quickly. And that's it.
Okay. We'll start with you this time, Councillor Sproul.
Just just to repeat, the having an outdoor preschool with X number of children demands very little parking, and if you have indoor spaces, it's the increase in the number of children, whether it's indoors or outdoors.
Yeah, she wants to have a full-time indoor daycare as well as the outdoor program. That is just pick up and drop off spot, but drop off and then have them there during the day.
Yeah, so it sounds like a lot. I'm just trying to think how many kids that is, because it's double what is happening now.
Yeah, and she's provincial, or it would have to be provincially licensed, so that's not through us, so it would be regulated.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the number of children in the space, that's all checked on by the province, so.
Okay, so it's just we're looking at parking really.
Yeah, for zoning for the use in the zone, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, Councillor Kettler.
Yeah, well, we all know that we desperately need childcare facilities here in Cumberland and throughout the Comox Valley. So I'm certainly willing to entertain this, but tonight is just for a referral to the Advisory Planning Commission, so I'm happy to do that first.
Okay. So you're making that motion?
Unless
Wait
somebody
for
else
Councillor
wants-
Brown. You want to comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say it's mostly drop off and pick up, which doesn't seem to be a problem now. So yeah, I'm happy to refer it as well.
Okay, I'll move that council refer the development variance permit to vary the required number of parking spaces from, spaces from 5 to 1 on the property described as Lot 1, Block 4, District Lot 21, Nelson District Plan 522, 2688 Penrith Ave to the Advisory Planning Commission.
Seconder.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Next, that council received the rezoning application of Lot A. Sorry. Let council receive the development variance permit 4640 Cumberland Road report.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
All right, so a third development variance permit is before you this evening. The village has received an application for a variance at 4640 Cumberland Road. The applicant is proposing to vary the side setback on the northeast side of the property from 7.5 meters to 3 to accommodate on-site parking and driveway access for a new industrial warehouse building. This application is for development variance permit only, and a development permit, industrial and environmental, would be required prior to building permit, but the applicant wanted to do them separately. So the purpose of this report is to request a referral to the next meeting of the Advisory Planning Commission. So the subject property currently has a 6-unit light industrial warehouse, a modular building with decks, and outdoor storage. And I just wanted to comment on the survey. Some of the public feedback was that they felt like the survey didn't reflect everything on site, but shipping containers aren't shown on surveys because they're regarded as temporary outdoor storage. So I just wanted to address that because I know some of the buildings might look bigger than they are, but they're shipping containers, which is permitted for that zone. So the applicant is proposing to build a second industrial warehouse, mirror image across from the existing warehouse to be occupied by Forbidden Bike Company, who has outgrown the current space that they're in. To accommodate parking and maintain a single driveway access for vehicular movement, the applicant is proposing to reduce that east side setback. By reducing the side setback, it would allow for more effective use of the property, creating a central parking area and a single vehicular travel lane between the two buildings, which would simplify travel on site and allows the businesses on both sides to share parking. And also it would emphasize a public realm by keeping that site activity central. Both pedestrian and vehicular, creating more opportunity for social interaction, as well as citing the proposed building to face the center of the property allows for building entrances to be prominent and visible from a common access driveway, which is actually required in the industrial development permit guidelines. Staff. Sorry, that's it. It's a referral, not a decision.
Okay. If no one on council has any questions, then we'll go to the motion. But if you have a question, please ask. Boy.
I'm okay with referring. I just this property, the other side of the property where all the buildings are right now. I recall that we had issues with compliance for some of the vegetation that was supposed to go behind that building, as well as wasn't there.
It's been completed now, so
the infrastructure.
I believe I can double check with the senior planner. Oh, Courtney's nodding. Yes, it's been completed.
Okay.
And I know there was also the TUP permit, which we were also asked about. That has been completed as well. So they've met all of the requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brown, did you have a question?
Yeah, so in one of the letters, the neighbor, and I didn't catch which, well, it doesn't say which neighbor, but I believe it's the industrial neighbor on the other side, is suggesting that 3.75 or 3.5 would work better. So has that been considered, his concern about access or something? Do we want to clarify that before we move it to APC, or just leave it?
I'm not totally sure. The site plan done by the surveyor, they took into consideration the width of parking spaces as well as the travel corridor down the center, and that's where the 3 meters comes from, is to create that travel space, safe travel space and parking so that it can be mirrored.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise, if it was in the center, then access would have to be around the side. It would be awkward.
Okay.
I guess. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
So I'll move that. Oh, Gwen? Or,
No,
sorry,
I'm
Councillor
just getting
Swain.
ready to read.
That council refer the development variance permit to reduce the east side setback from 7.5 meters, 24.6 feet to 3 meters, 9.8 feet on the property described as Lot 1, Section 25, Township 10, Comox District Plan 35738, 4640 Cumberland Road to the Advisory Planning Commission.
Seconded.
All in favor? Carried. Next, that council received the rezoning application of Lot 8, Alveston Avenue referral report.
Move receipt. Second.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. This
Oh, sorry. All in favor?
oh, sorry.
Carried.
Now we're ready.
Sorry, Karen.
So this report introduces a concept for rezoning of currently a vacant property on Alveston Avenue across from the industrial area on the other side of Alveston. And the developers developed this concept that would provide some affordable home ownership, and we had that presentation earlier this afternoon. So that's the component of the proposal. So there's so the report's to share that concept and then also provide a bit more information on the affordable home ownership program and seek council direction on both. So the proposal is to create 22 affordable home ownership lots, and the applicant is proposing to develop them with small single-family dwellings, modular homes. And BC Housing is interested in participating in through that home ownership program that we learned about this afternoon. That would see BC Housing put some equity into that project. It would be there would be eligible buyers who have a certain income, middle income earners who would qualify for the purchasing the units, and BC Housing would provide a second mortgage on the property. And also some interim construction financing to the developer at reduced rates. And then the draft agreement with BC Housing that we would be looking at developing, if council is in support of that, further with BC Housing, would see the village contributing potentially in several possible forms. The agreement is not specific to this proposal. I'd like to point out it's really for affordable, just enter a general memorandum of understanding to enter into such agreements with BC Housing, and as the and work together to promote a more affordable home ownership in the village. And if this rezoning does go ahead, then there would be a specific agreement, a partnership agreement with the village, BC Housing, and the developer, who would identify what the contribution is of each party. And BC Housing would quantify what that contribution is, if it's a relaxation of parking requirements or the density that might be created on that lot, the additional density. So that would still be coming, but part of the recommendation here is just to pursue a memorandum of understanding, which is independent somewhat of this proposal, but also needs to be in place to advance this particular development proposal. So aside from the 22 lots that would be for a single family affordable home ownership, the applicant is also proposing some mixed use live work lots, and those would be backing onto Alveston Avenue and provide some transition to the industrial uses across the street. Access would be from within the lot via that road that ends in a bulb in that concept that is attached as one of the appendices. And then on the other side of that street and backing onto a green space that is proposed by the developer would be multifamily housing, so in the form of apartments. And we still have it yet to finalize what the components might be of rental tenure or just regular strata-owned properties at market rate, and whether there would be a density bonus. So we're still in discussion. So this initial concept is to see where council is at, and also seek a referral to the APC and the Homelessness Affordable Housing Committees to have further discussions on that. Just also want to point out that the mixed use and live work lots are trying to fill a need within the village for kind of smaller industrial minor industrial lots, and not heavy industrial use, but sort of more, I don't know what to call them, craft type potential small scale processing businesses that we seem to have a little bit of a demand for, and currently is served by the Edwards property. That's light industrial development on Cumberland Road that has a little bit of that kind of possibility. So this would expand that, those kind of spaces. And then the applicant was also interested in including uses that we are not currently don't really cover well in the zoning bylaw, which is a fitness studio, which came up as a recently council granted temporary use for fitness studio use within that other light industrial area. So this seems to be appropriate space for that, because it's fairly low impact, but it still requires potentially quite a bit of parking. And yeah, other proposed uses are microbrewery, winery, distillery, personal services, small scale kind of retail, perhaps a coffee shop to liven up that space and encourage, because there'd be live work to have a small space like that. Childcare, we try to put that in everywhere now. Would also be a nice area for that. What actual uses will result, we don't control, of course, but at least we provide the opportunity for those kind of uses. Yeah, the proposal, the concept does meet a lot of our the goals in and policies in our OCP. It's and also the regional growth strategy, in that it's fairly close to our downtown core. It's about 900 meters walking distance, which is about 15 minutes to walk to the downtown core, less than 15 minutes, depending how fast you walk. So it does meet that interest to see development or density close to the downtown core. Other policies in the OCP speak to affordable housing, and whatever form that might take. In this case, it would be affordable home ownership, which is new to us. There's park dedication proposed along the drainage corridor with some additional space to allow us to put a trail within that park area, outside of the sensitive area close to that trail. And my understanding is, and Councillor Sproul will be sure can correct me, is that the historic railway corridor, the Welling Colliery, was located within that green space, even though I've seen also a map in my report actually say it's not, because our Parks and Greenways map shows it going right across to the middle of the property. So I look forward to hearing Councillor Sproul's your knowledge on that. Yeah, I think I think one key one is really also that it provides some new economic opportunities potentially to the village.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Brown.
Thank you. This looks very interesting. They are when you look at the lots adjacent to them, they are very small lots. One of the things that I was thinking about when we were getting the presentation at the Committee of the Whole was that these would be good for employees, people who live or are working in Cumberland. So hopefully we can build that into the agreement when the time comes. But I do have a question about the buffer. There's a 6-meter buffer strip, but it's not green. But I think there's trees there now. I'm quite concerned about the tree retention on this property, as you can imagine. So I did have a look, and there's a few in the brown zone in the live work mixed use, and then there's some along the. Oh, actually, no, it's not. Probably not along that buffer. It's the other against the adjacent existing lots, which it looks to be that. Green slice along the side is maybe trying to protect those trees. Is there any conversation about that so far?
Yes, so the developer, as part of the rezoning, has to complete some studies for the village, and we did ask for clarity on where some of the mature trees are located. So he is working on that. So before the report comes back to council, I believe we will have some of those studies. Definitely before we introduce a bylaw, but the concept would be coming back to you. Okay. But yes, it's quite possible that some of the mature trees that are along the southern boundary of the property are not located within the park. So we're having a look of where they are. They're meant to identify the location of those, whether that can be included in the park area by moving the boundary over, or it could be covenanted, or just find out what the significance of those trees is. So that is on his list to look into.
Okay.
About the buffer on the left west side of the property, on the other side of the yellow area, the single family affordable home ownership lots. So that's pretty open right now. So partially the sewer line, our existing sewer line, runs across below that. And he wants to relocate that under the proposed road, which says 60 meters, which actually may end up having to be 18. So this is still a concept. So I think that was more the intent behind that is pretty open. There was more a little bit of a buffer to the that pond that's within the park space. On the other side, there is a small dam that holds that back, and then also just a walking connection, so you can do a loop with the existing trail system.
Okay. So when in terms of process, because we're just learning about this housing apparatus, affordable housing apparatus, when does that conversation happens when it comes back after APC and homeless committee? Or when do we get input into that, what that looks like?
Yeah, so if council, one of the recommendations is to direct us to work with BC Housing on that memorandum of understanding. So you have certain criteria, things that you want us to explore with them. This would be a good time to let us know. And yes, I mean, we would have to have that in place before the rezoning, really, so that it's clear that everyone's on board with what's in the agreement. And the developer has some certainty around that too. And really the purpose of this initial concept is he really does want to get a read of council of where you're at, whether generally you think this is something that looks promising. He has a deadline for his purchase, so he's trying to figure out whether it makes sense to proceed and keep going, because that deadline is before we could be possibly finishing a rezoning. So he wants to see where everyone is at, and he's also open to discussions. So.
Okay. Do you want me to keep going, or do you want to go around and then come back to what we think that should be in the agreement?
Yeah, I would like to have a further discussion with members.
I forget. I mean, I'm listening to what you say, and then I'm going, what am I,
Councillor Sproul, do you have any questions?
Questions and comments. I'll try and do them in blocks, so that... whilst the concept of the small homes and the live to work and all that, I really like that. I've always admired Tin Town in Rosewall Crescent, so this sounds a little bit like that, and I'm happy to see something different and much needed. My concerns are the Wellington Colliery Railway and the why. The why was so important. If you look at map, page 2, and you see the orange boundary to the property we're talking about. At that pointy end on the right was the Y, and that's so the Wellington Colliery Railway came from Union Bay, Royston, round Boulder Hill, and then at first in 1888 to 1894, the railway just continued to number 4 mine. But when coal was running out there, they decided to build number 5 mine, which was to the north, and that's when then a spur was put to the north of Cumberland, due north, which then went to number 5 mine and then was extended to Bevan. And it was a really important place because all the coal carts, full ones, were all rounded up there and waiting and being hooked up all the time to be taken down to the ocean. So the park dedication, and now on page 5, Karen, you mentioned that the proposed linear park does not follow the historic railway grade.
Well,
it's important to me.
So I think perhaps could correct me if that's wrong. So our map in the Parks and Greenways plan shows it sort of more in the middle of the property. But I understand you may have other mapping that shows it where it is. And when you're actually on site, the berm, there's sort of a bit of a build-up berm, suggests that it is within the park. So we need to clarify that.
Well, I'd really like to see it following the grade. I've been waiting years for this opportunity. I mean, the way to get these things is to wait till the development is going in, and that's how Kendall has a trail, because we spoke to Cold Valley at the time, and we got that as an amenity. And I just think the maps should reflect right-of-way or Wellington Colliery Railway, any other planning reports that we've had in the past, like just north of the landfill is the new industrial area, and it shows Wellington Colliery Railway, WCR. There's nothing to say that this was the Y, or I just would like to see the trail going from the Y, which is just in from the Royston Road, to go. It goes behind the houses and then comes out on Carlisle Lane, and then it crossed the Royston Cumberland Road, and then that's still the railway that swings around the BMX and then is much used on the south side. And I think we will have everything, because the regional district bought a huge chunk of land with the railway in from Royston up to Union Bay, because I suggested they did. And it hasn't been fully developed yet, but it will. I'm afraid of losing the right-of-way of the railway and the name of it. There's pictures of, in this book, Colliery Railways of Cumberland. It shows the locomotives, it shows the number 5, the Y. The Y just meant a split. So anyway, these are the opportunities I'm always looking for, is to get those last bits of the railway through development, and I was hoping that this could really clearly give us that opportunity. I don't know what else to say.
Anything further? No? Councillor Kettler?
Thanks. Yeah, so we had the BC Housing presentation earlier today in our committee of the whole. So they said there's 2 agreements that need to happen. The memorandum of understanding that has 2 parties, the province and the municipality, and then the second agreement would be the project partner agreement, which would have 3 partners or 3 parties: BC Housing, Village of Cumberland, and the developer. So just a little confused about how we would do the timing of that. I think that we had asked for some reference documents as far as the MOU goes of other communities our size, because what they showed in their presentation was large cities, and so we requested some examples of smaller communities, Tofino, and I'm not sure, there's 2 other ones that they had mentioned. But I think it'd be good for us to be able to look at those documents, because what they're giving us is just the standard template, and those other communities have likely had some input into what works for them, and we might have some insight if we look at those first before we do our MOU. And then just sort of to follow up on Councillor Brown's question about, so when would we have input into the second agreement, the project partnership agreement, as far as coming back to council with that?
Yeah. So my understanding is the MOU is kind of the first agreement that needs to be agreed to and signed, which is kind of an overarching agreement. Doesn't go into a lot of detail. It's really to commit to work together. And I think the agreements that he was referring to, I think the others were Sycamoos and Ucluelet. Yeah, I did write that down. It'd be good to know what they did. Refer to the partnering agreement, which is a bit more detailed, where perhaps there is certain criteria that the municipalities wants to add. In that case, I think he referred to someone, they added criteria for how to select the eligible buyers. earlier today. So that's a separate agreement. That's more project specific. So before we enter into that or start discussing, there has to be an understanding that council supports the concept, because it's everyone's time that goes into drafting those. So if it generally the concept is supported, then we would start working on that those agreements. And I would assume that they would then be a condition of rezoning. So they would come. So that final agreement would have to come to you. I suppose with the bylaws, that partnering agreement.
So considering that the project partnership agreement, we would want to tailor it more to our community and have, like they said earlier today, maybe some input on selection criteria for those eligible to buy there. Would we want that to go to our committees now, like to the Affordable Housing Committee along with the MOU now, so that they could have input on that as well?
I think that would be great if you have something in mind right now based on what you heard this afternoon, and we can still refine that when we have a draft agreement. But that would be helpful, because then that we can advance the project a little bit quicker, right? So we don't have to come back too many times. So if something is already in your mind from the discussion earlier, that would be helpful. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And it doesn't have to be a resolution. You can just let me, I'll take notes. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think it has to be a resolution. Does it have to be?
I could add it to this resolution if you want. Yeah.
Okay. I would like to see it go to the Advisory Planning Commission, and I do support the drafting of the master partnering, the recommendation. I do support that. It's very difficult because we've just learned about it today, and I know some have some good ideas, but I think that also needs some time to think about what other communities have added, because we don't want to miss anything. And I'm sure the community groups are also going to have a great deal of input into what they would like to see in this. So I will wait till I hear from them. So what is your pleasure, Council?
I have things to add, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of the feedback for the developer on the property, on the concept plan, the like I said, the lots are very small. So the greenway, the green space is very important, because I'm not sure what the lot coverage would be on those smaller lots, but I presume we would loosen that as part of one of the things we give, maybe. So making sure that there's enough green space and actually trees in the interior of the development, not just in the park areas. And then the multi-residential, I think the thing that we're missing in Cumberland is townhouses. I think there's a really big demand for downsizing elders, or just that ease of small yards and main access on the ground. And that's sort of that missing middle housing that we've got now that we're getting apartments. So having that multi-residential be those types of things between, maybe 4 and, 7 units or something. And then having the eligible buyers be Cumberland employed, so that we're reducing their need to drive, so that potentially they don't need vehicles, because I think parking is probably another thing that we'll want to consider on the agreement or whatever in the plan. And then I'm hoping that that Colliery Trail is in that existing green space, because it is sort of aligned with Carlisle Lane. So fingers crossed that that's where it is. And he's doing some kind of, I'm just curious about a wildlife corridor. Is that like a bear? I don't hang out down there. Is that a bear trail? Is there, does it need to be a wildlife thing? That's my just initial thoughts on it.
Anyone else? Okay, somebody like to make the motion?
I'll move that council refer the rezoning application of Lot A, Elverston Avenue to the Advisory Planning Commission and the Homelessness and Affordable Housing Committee for comment, and that council direct staff to review the draft master partnering memorandum of understanding with BC Housing and present a final agreement for consideration at an upcoming meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Yay. Thank you. That council received the report wastewater upgrade project application for gas tax strategic priorities.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Good evening. Right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Can you hear me?
What?
We can hear you, we just can't
We just can't see you
Oh,
yet.
is this Paul Nash?
Yes.
So we're just waiting for you to come up on the screen, Paul.
Okay, thanks.
You slowly fade in.
Could you
Mm.
turn the lights down a bit,
Oh,
please?
You are emerging in front of us.
We're getting the sunlight right now.
There you are.
Welcome, Paul. You're on.
All right, thank you. Well, last time I was there, I said I looked forward to coming back to Cumberland in summer, and here it is at summer, but I'm not back in Cumberland. But anyway, presenting by Zoom is the next best thing. I feel I should point out an omission in the previous report. They didn't mention that those people in those new proposed lots will get the pleasure of living within walking distance of a fantastic wastewater treatment facility, and if we get this funding, of a wonderfully revitalised wetland area. So I think that's a positive feature for that development, at no extra charge to the developer. So for tonight, the gas tax application, I will share my screen so I can scroll through the report. And there we go. Okay, is that up on the screen now, the council report?
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, I won't go through the report in detail because I hope you've all read it because it's very exciting stuff. But of course, a new opportunity has come up for funding, which of course we want to leap on. I think the major things about this opportunity, it's through UBCM rather than the federal government. So we might have a slightly faster decision-making process. And our phase split here, it's all about phase 2, of course, this extra funding. Phase 1 is underway. And it was interesting to read through the criteria for it. So this one here, the objectives. So the criteria for this program are similar, but just a few subtle differences to the Investment in Canada infrastructure program that we applied for in February. I particularly like this criteria here, and I probably should have scored it at 5 stars, right? Phase 2 is almost all about resilience, either climate or seismic. So, we it was forced upon us, but we've responded to it. So we meet that, but we actually meet a lot of these objectives very nicely. So I think we do indeed have an excellent chance of funding, which is great. And then the revised funding ask. So what we've done here is just added further 5% to the contingency for inflationary measures. And with these applications, they want you to have enough contingency, but not be asking for the world. So in this case, I think we've got it just right here with adding a little bit extra, which we may or may not need, but it's in there. And otherwise, the rest of the application, the technical nature remains unchanged. And that's really, I think, all I need to say. And if there's, of course, questions on the financial implications, I can put those over to Michelle, as I like to do. But with that, I think actually I will finish my verbal report and throw it back to council. I think Oh, last comment, yes, climate change, right? There it is again. That's what it's all about with this phase 2 stuff. So a great candidate for the funding. So with that, I think I'll stop speaking there and turn it back to Mayor and Council for questions. Thank you.
Okay. Starting with questions, Councillor Brown?
Thank you. So, I'm good with I'm happy to apply again. I'm curious if then we would withdraw the Isip grant? Is that, or we just leave it in there and they won't give it to us or something? What happens with that?
That's a great question. What happens is they both stay in there until we get a positive decision on one or the other. So if UBCM makes its decisions first and we get it, then we withdraw ICIP. And I might add that the review committee at the provincial level is the same people. So yeah, so both of them will stay active, and hopefully we then get one or other of them. And as soon as we do, we withdraw the other one.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question, I guess, is for Michelle regarding the sewer reserves. And so thankfully, they're also in this report. So the sewer reserve is sitting at 708,000 and change, and we're committing a bunch of that. And what does that mean for that reserve? And was that reserve entirely meant for this project? So it's good to spend it all, or were there other things that we were supposed to be spending that money on?
Yeah, sorry, where are you seeing 708? What page?
In the, oh Jesus, I didn't write down the page. In the financial reports, in the reserves sections, way on down there.
Oh, that might be in the addendum from the previous report. Is that where it is?
Very, like in the attached report, you mean?
Yeah, it's in
Yeah,
the
on this
subsequent
page.
report, in the financial report.
Yeah, so you will see some. It's really, when we say reserves, we're actually using the sewer DCCs, and we do have sufficient amount. We were going to use those DCCs to repay the debt before all of these extra costs came in. Now we're going with the parcel charge and trying to get grant funding, and then the DCCs, which you'll have a report a little later for a bylaw to pull it out,
Okay.
will be used for this project, for the overages. And at this point, we're just not sure. It's not 708. It's I think I'll have to wait till I get my other report because I'll pull it up. But at this point, whatever the overages are, we still don't quite know what any other ones are because we haven't gone out for tenders for the construction. So we'll wait for that, but we'll pull the money out of the DCCs, put it into a reserve so that we're ready for that, and then anything that's, I'll talk a little bit more, but we wouldn't use it all. Right before we go to long-term debt, anything out of that reserve that's not been spent, we just won't go to debt for that amount.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
That helps.
I think that's all I had.
Okay.
Councillor Sproul?
I think it's quite clearly laid out, so
Yes.
I'm quite happy.
Councillor Kettler?
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, the phase 2 is all the good stuff, in my opinion. Getting that reed bed has always been top of my list to be able to treat the effluent above and beyond what's required from the province, and to be able to treat pharmaceuticals. I think it would be quite a special project for our community, and then of course being able to have some trails in there would be lovely as well. So yeah, I'm definitely into applying for more funding, anything that we can get. But I certainly do have my concerns about the ever increasing costs of the project as a whole, and our ability to service the debt that we may end up incurring in the end once we figure out what all the costs are. So
not totally keeping me up at night, but getting close.
If I may comment on that, with phase one, we don't have as much control as we would like over that because we have to build the stated scope to meet the regulatory requirements, and ultimately, we do our best, but it's going to cost what it's going to cost. With phase two, we actually have discretion here because, with the exception of the tertiary filtration, none of it is actually about meeting regulatory requirements. So we have some discretion as to how much we actually want to do for the wetland augmentation and the channel relocation. We have to fill in the existing channel, but how fancy we want to get on the new one, we have some discretion. So with phase two, we will be able to some extent, control costs by changing or reducing the scope if need be. With phase one, we don't have that discretion. We've already reduced the scope by shifting things sideways into phase two. So I'm more confident we'll be able to keep phase two to within a stated budget, and it just means we may end up having to reduce scope on some things. That's all.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Paul, I still believe we have an excellent project, and that I'm really disappointed that the costs have gone up, but we still need the project completed. So that, to me, solves a lot of issues for the village to get this completed. So anyway, thank you very much for all the hard work and finding us additional funds. Hopefully.
May I
Yeah.
ask a question?
Well, identifying funds is what I do best, and I'd like to think that getting them is what I do second best.
Councillor Sproul has a question.
Yes, unfortunately, I wasn't able to be on the tour at the sewage lagoons last week. Was there a good turnout?
You have to ask Paul.
Paul, I don't know who was leading it. Paul, was there a few people?
It was, I think we ended up with about 10 or 12 people. It wasn't, it wasn't a sellout crowd, but it was enough to make it worthwhile, and we had good input and good questions, and a good walk around. So it would have been nice if there had been more, but it was enough to make it worthwhile.
Okay. Would someone like to move the motions?
That council approve making the application to the Gas Tax Strategic Priorities Fund for funding of Phase 2 of the High Performance Wastewater Lagoon Upgrade Project for a grant value of $2.5 million, and that council commit to funding the municipal portion of the project, $2,440,000, using a combination of existing approved green municipal fund funding and sewer reserves for a total project amount of $4,940,000.
Seconder?
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Well, thank you very much. I look forward to completing this, and fingers crossed for a successful application.
Thank you very much. Next, that council receive the Cumberland Business Association CBA Thrive Grant Update Report.
Move receipt. Second.
All in favor?
It's
In
the-
unison? All in favor? Carried.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's good to be in front of yourself and council again on this first of summer evening. I just want to acknowledge it. We've all waited so long. What I have in front of you is an update report on a revised scope of the CBA's Plan Thrive project. As you know, they came to us in the fall, late fall, acknowledging that they'd been awarded $50,000 to undertake a beautification project and revitalization project through Ice-T within the downtown core. It was quite a large scope project, and so when we brought it to council, we hadn't had a good look at what it was going to be. We hadn't had a chance to, staff or council, to review the application itself. Since that time, there's been some further discussions with the village, with staff specifically, as well as some turnover in membership and leadership at the CBA. So there's things have gone by to give us reasons to revisit this project. And I'd like to acknowledge the work that the CBA did and what you have in here in a revised scope, which I believe and other staff believe is a much more obtainable project for the village, and likewise gives us a foundation for something to build off of. And I kind of have some of those pieces discussed within my recommendations. Firstly, looking for council's approval that for this project, that it fits within things that you're comfortable with, and you think it's a good fit for our community. And secondly, that you direct council or direct staff to enter into an operational agreement and work collectively with the CBA in implementing the project. And I'll walk a bit through the revised scope, respecting that you may not have the big initial scope. The big key thing with this project is it focuses at the intersection of 2nd and Dunsmuir. The CBA acknowledged, I think that lots of us do, that top half of Dunsmuir starting at 2nd Street is a bit quieter than the active area around Village Square. And so one of the intents with the CBA was to inject a little bit of life and color and Cumberland into this area. And they're going to propose to do this. The goals of the projects and the ideas of the projects are still there, significantly by adding paint, both in murals and in broad paint on the sidewalks to add a bit of color, to create areas on 2nd Street which will be more permanent but still temporary parklets or rest areas for people that are visiting our business core, to get some shade, to sit down, to eat some food, to spend some time in our downtown core. And then some smaller features like benches and the flags and some other types of ideas that will help sort of bring life and energy to that area. The most I think the biggest piece that we're most interested in is the paint. And so we're looking at two things. Paint on murals and paint on the sidewalk. Originally, in the original scope, the CBA had pretty grand ideas of painting murals right on the sidewalk. And since then, they've recognized, one, time won't allow for it, and two, it's very hard to maintain that level of detail on the sidewalk. And so what they've proposed for the murals is to move them onto metal panels and do a number of metal panel. The CBA has engaged 4 local artists who will take over each corner. They'll do murals on metal panels, which, respecting as well that neighborhood's going to go through a bit of flux as development changes what it potentially looks like. And so when sidewalks and buildings potentially are altered or removed, these panels can be moved around, hanging on fences, hanging on other buildings. They have permission from 3 of the corners to hang art on their buildings already. So that's in place. And so when the Cumberland Hotel gets a fence put up from it, or the Big Pink store gets a fence put up in front of it, those panels can add a little bit more life than flat plywood. Secondly, there's paint that's going to go on the sidewalk. And they're looking at more broader colors and maybe bigger patterns. What this will allow for easier maintenance, as well as one of the things that our engineering technician told us is safety and accessibility. And having a lot of detailed paint hides imperfections in sidewalks. And so having him review these things and give us that advice back to the CBA, yes, broader patterns are bigger swashes of color, things a bit more simple that are not creating confusion to the eye. And part of what we've suggested as an operational agreement is how do we look after this paint, recognizing that maybe it's not something the village staff has time for in their work plans. And so that operational agreement will help kind of lay out the land of the roles and responsibilities, who's taking care of that paint. The CBA, through their previous application, has already agreed to take on that responsibility, but we'll have it in a formal agreement. Preliminary discussions talk about, a touch-up in the fall and a touch-up in the spring. And just a chance to come in and do it. They don't need to be out there all the time. The paint as well has been cleared by Joel, our engineering tech, that it's designed for sidewalks. It doesn't create slip hazards and all that stuff. So that was they've already purchased their paint on the direction of somebody who knew what they were doing. So those pieces are in place. So each 4 corners will have artwork right on the corners itself, the patterns painted right on the sidewalk, the color palette they've provided to us. So those colors are pulled in partnership with the museum. So part of their application is working through the museum to make sure they had aspects of heritage down and understanding of those things. The subject matter for the murals is heritage and natural flora and fauna. And so it's likely that you're going to see natural plants, trees, bushes, as well as some heritage themes within that artwork. That artwork hasn't been, there's no designs yet. It's in the minds of the artists. And I don't know if council would be comfortable saying yes or no to those things, but we know that there's some guidelines, heritage, flora and fauna, which I think are good fits for our community. Secondly is these parklets and rest areas that they want to create. And that's, I think put it in the report, one great example of that is what Chris Moon did in front of his business last year with their tent. So each corner will have a tent with picnic tables or other things in it. It'll have plants. We'll install barriers like we have for all our sidewalk patios. And we've gotten direction from our engineering tech again that the CBA is welcome and they're happy to go and paint those. And so we're going to add a bit of color. The CBA is welcome to paint them like they do on the sidewalks or within their murals, as long as they don't cover the reflective safety strips. So again, that'll add a bit more color into these places. The previous older scope, they had much more larger features within these parklets, large planting barrels and things that were permanent. That were not be easily moved by staff, or if they got hit by a vehicle, it could create issues. They also had painting in the streetscape, right in the roadway. You might have seen on downtown 5th where they have curb bump outs. And all this is something that is popular now in trafficked areas. Staff recommended that it's best to look at these things through our transportation master plan, and we look at all our intersections, as opposed to doing one ad hoc and then doing sort of a reactionary step with the rest. So it's an idea. We'll take that as feedback from the CBA that this is something that might help calm our downtown thoroughfares, and we'll put that feedback into our transportation master planning process. Originally, they have flags as well, which is our traditional May Day flags. The CBA was quite anxious to hang those because we hadn't seen them in 2 years at the time of application. But now that they're back, they're up, and we'll just leave them. And they'll be part of that place. And so again, this is something that I saw as an in-kind sort of support on behalf of Public Works, but it's something that's back and that we're doing. So now that we know that intersection is there, we'll just leave the flags as is. They originally also wanted to hang some LED lights from those flags. And they've changed the scope to take those lights off and add them to the tents and the artwork potentially, so that it's not hanging above the streetscape and creating potential challenges, or requiring staff or someone else to get on ladders to go up and check on them. So it's just a maintenance and long-term sort of operational piece. Cold cart benches are still part of it. And we've had discussions about the locations where those can fit in that downtown. The nice thing is that there is some still there. I know the CBA has talked to Rotary about getting the plaques help with restoring. So again, it fits within the planning and the processes that we have for benches. And so that's something that we can incorporate, will be part of that plan that we implement. And finally, there's a piece in there that they really had hopes for with a statue or a structure of some kind. And they'd hoped to put that on the sidewalk itself at the corner of 2nd Dunsmuir. It's a tight fit, and we're not sure it's the safest thing, and especially without any design elements or understanding what the size of the structure is, how it's supposed to be interactive, and so safety, public space is all important things. We really like the idea. We can think of other ideas in the community potentially where it's a better fit. So we're not saying no, and the CBA is not saying no, but we're going to talk about it a little bit longer and make sure that if we're going to go down that road, that it's something that's going to really benefit the village. And that might be looking at a new location, putting it in a more public area, or working with a private business owner and a third party or a private land to see if that they want to be the host of it. So there's other ideas that we have for it. And so, as I said in my report, right now it's not put forward, but we could easily include that within the implementation scope should we come to an agreeable solution for it. So based on that, my ask of council is to approve or ask any questions and approve the project in principle as described. And as well as direct staff to continue to work with the CBA in implementing the project, and to work through sort of a long-term partnership agreement on who's going to maintain that. I'd also like to acknowledge, I think this agreement will also extend into the world of how we work on these types of opportunities in the future. And I would hope that, should next year come up and we see an opportunity through ICE-T, that the village and CBA could tackle this together. And I think that agreement is a good place to start that sort of framework. So, questions?
Thank you very much. We'll start with Councillor Kettler.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Kaylin. I'm glad that there was a rescoping. I think the original proposal had some things that were a little untenable and I think you and the CBA have found some good solutions to that. I like the panels, and that we won't be losing that art that was going to be lost if it was going to go on those sidewalks, and then those sidewalks would be ripped up for development of the buildings on those corners. So yeah, I'm glad that that we found that workaround for that. The statue, I would like to find a way to keep that. I think that it's great having something interactive, and supporting artists, right? It's all this stuff is local artists, and that's absolutely wonderful. You know, just as you were saying at the end there, that we could sort of use this for other projects, then I started thinking about our strategy that's supposed to, the Parks and Rec and Arts strategy that we're working on, that we could sort of tie something into that. How, you know, direction of how we include local artists in all sorts of projects that we do as council, and maybe we could make that a little bit more official in that strategy. Yeah, everything else looks great, and I think it'll be a wonderful project in the end, and I thank CBA, and I thank you, Kaylin, for working on it. Great.
Thanks, Councillor. I just take note to include this feedback and this discussion within our RAC planning, within our recreation, arts and culture, because through the economic development strategy, you know, these are the types of things that RAC plan is going to give us a foundation for, is how can we not only support artists by creating more art in our community, but providing work for local artists. And you know, same with staff, we're really hopeful that we can find a spot for this. One of the things the CBA, I should have mentioned, the CBA is going to do is they're going to go back to ICE-T and ask for a bit more time. And so, based on your recommendation today, we'll provide them a letter of support that we're on the same page with what needs to be done. So hopefully we can find ourselves a bit more time, that we can come up with a really good idea, something interactive. Originally, it's supposed to be reflective of our mountain bike community. It's going to be made up of bike parts. And so interactive pedaling puts. And one of the things I mentioned our nonprofits don't have is a donation box. And this statue would be a great opportunity just to ask for a toonie. And that to go to the great organizations in our community. And so I've dropped that bug, and hopefully we can find something like that that can really benefit our community.
Okay. Councillor Sproul?
No, I like the idea. It's very creative, very festive. It'll be like Christmas all year round. Thanks.
Councillor Brown?
Thanks so much for your continued perseverance on this project, and your continued work with the CBA. The project's definitely had its ups and downs, and here we are. So I'm so grateful that we've managed to move this forward, because I think it's an opportunity we didn't want to lose. Yes, super keen on the sculpture thing. Maybe it's a miner on a bike or something like that. And maybe, like you said, it's on a building instead of, or something, some other secure place, given the size of our sidewalks, and how many people are on them sometime, which is great. And I think they're right. It's drawing people up. Dunsmuir is definitely needed. But I wanted to just ask about the lights. So I know other communities have done lights across the streets because they have their own light posts, and they can hang things across the streets. But now that we've managed to hang our flags, is there a way that we could do a similar thing with those lights? Maybe not for this particular project, but I would just like us to continue to think about that, because it would be so lovely to have that additional festiveness in the dark days of winter, now that we don't have the snowflakes or any of the other things on the poles, right? So yeah, a little plug for that. And yeah, I know there's been talk of a rainbow something, so maybe one of the block sidewalks is a rainbow, given it's Pride Month. Yeah, and also acknowledging that communities all over the world do this as a traffic calming mechanism, and because we are obviously very concerned about people speeding and driving through stop signs, especially on Dunsmuir, hopefully this will help a little. And there's always room to expand it onto the street later, should we want to.
Yeah, and I think the approach is to make sure that we look at every intersection the same.
Yeah.
You know, I think we already see as locals here differences in each intersection depending on if it's two-way stop or four-way stop. This intersection here, people drive through it really fast, and the other three are four-way stops. So, you know, it's about being consistent. I just also acknowledge that the schedule to have this work done is we'll have everything complete. ICE-T would like to have the final end product where all the pieces are done, and we're looking at probably early September to have everything done. So you'll see the parklets go up probably pretty quickly. You'll start to see the work and the paint going down corner by corner relatively quickly. So you will see things happen throughout the summer. And then in the fall, we'll gladly collectively look together and see everything as a whole. Is the plan.
Well, thank you, Kaylin, for not giving up on this project and bringing this forward. I think it's going to be an amazing addition to the downtown core. The one thing is BC Hydro, we can't use our Christmas decorations anymore from them, but the village actually paid Hydro for the electrical letdowns. So maybe there's a way of putting the lights, connecting them to there somehow. I don't know how. But if they're not going to let us use them anymore, they should pay us back for the money that we spent on those, because it was expensive at the time. And so sometimes it's worth a reminder.
I would actually like to see the direction from BC Hydro that told us we can't.
Well, the community liaison person is a very nice fellow.
And also, I mean, we should understand what the solution is then. I mean, if our traditional way of doing things doesn't work, absolutely. Let's find something that we can do. Yeah.
Yeah, and they like to light up things because then they make money. So look at it a different way.
So we've got those bright new LEDs.
Yes, yes. Okay, thank you very much. There is a motion there.
I'll move that council approve the scope of the Cumberland Business Association's Thrive Grant project as described in the council report dated June 22nd, 2022, and that council direct staff to work with the CBA in Thrive project implementation, including development of an operational agreement, and authorize the CAO to execute the agreement.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Next, we have the recommend that council receives the COVID-19 restart funding report.
That's what we pulled, didn't we?
No, we're not pulling the whole report.
Okay.
Motion, you made the motion to receive? Seconder?
Second.
All in favor? Carried. And yes, I would like to pull the last one up to a maximum of 10,000 contribution to the Cumberland Community School Society for food share program storage solutions. More information has come forward and it will be presented at the next council meeting. Yes.
Okay. Good evening, council. The village back in 2020 received just over $1.3 million for COVID-19 to deal with the impacts of COVID-19 and also the recovery from that. So throughout the time since that, 2020, council has directed staff to use those funds towards initiatives that have mitigated those impacts and also have provided some recovery initiatives as well. So when you take those those fund uses into account, add some interest that you've earned, we've seen a little bit of savings and reallocation of funds on some of the other projects. We have just over $172,000 left to spend still. Won't be a problem So we are the staff level. We've put our heads together and we recommend a few uses at this point, and we think that should be almost the end of those funds, and then we'll come back towards the end with any leftover funds and make a recommendation for those as well. So. First is we would like to do a workstation over in the operations facility, the old fire hall, and we would like to do that for a temporary use for any time public works staff have to do some training, or if we need some admin time over there to help out and that kind of stuff. And then that would be like a segregated workstation. So and that would be a good idea, and that could actually be transferred over to any new location as well, which so that's $5,000. And that brings me into the next one is the concept plan for the future operations facility, and so that's $12,000. And one thing that we really realized with COVID is we need to, when we have capacity issues in our space, that was where a lot of the impact was with COVID. So we think that this concept plan is going to move us forward in addressing some of those capacity issues that we still have with Public Works staying so close to our municipal office. Then the next one is $80,000, and that is the IT solutions as part of the development modernization project. So at the May 25th meeting, Council was presented with the modernization recommendation report, and so what's happened with that recommendations report is that it highlighted the need for some more process improvements, and so staff is recommending that we use COVID funds for the IT, because the IT for the planning department is really surrounding like working from home and working remotely and all of those impacts that COVID actually had on us, that we can mitigate those. And then we could reallocate that $80,000 that's in the grant that we received towards greater areas of the modernization project. And we think that'll make a more robust process and much better. Then moving on to, we recommend $5,000 for records management and retention policies. That is just keeping up with our legislated requirements for that type of remote work. So that's what we're recommending there. And $10,000 for laptop workstations, because what we're finding is with the original upgrades that we used COVID funds for IT is that a few of the managers, we actually got docking stations and laptops for their workstations instead of actual computers. And so we can work remotely. We can take those laptops anywhere that we have to work remotely with. And then it's much easier. You just come back in and you put yourself into the docking station. So we're recommending to use this money for 5 more within the departments. And we would actually, probably replace the desktops that need to be replaced first with those as well. Then we think $8,800 for janitorial equipment, because that was one of our biggest pressures with COVID, was the janitorial, making sure everything was sanitized, cleaned. And so, yeah, just a few systems like brooms, mop and vacuum systems, just to allow for that. And then we also had to pay already $2,200 for air purifiers, which we had to do that for the office, but we think that's also a good use of the COVID funds. And then the gym lighting system upgrade for $9,200. What we did notice is a large space like the gym is quite useful during an outbreak like COVID. We used it for tax collection, so people could space out. If you think about any of the programs, if the government, if provincial regulations were to allow those programs to continue, they probably would only allow them with adequate spacing, like things like that. So we thought one of the things that is lacking over there is proper lighting system, and so we would like to use the funds for that. So we're ready for that system. And then the $2,600 for the scanner membership hardware would just definitely always separate the staff from the members. They can just automatically scan their cards and not have to do that, go through the staff as much. Moving on to the $8,300 for 3 speed flasher units. We'd like to put one coming into Cumberland, one going out of Cumberland, and we would ensure that there's a better. We're working on not allowing those to be vandalized again. A proper program for that, and then we would like one more for the Kendall area, because we heard through council that that's an area that you'd like to see that kind of stuff. And then the Lake Park digital sign for the parking, $32.50. We did that last year. It worked really well, and we're just seeing so much visitor entry into Cumberland, and these are huge pressures, and so that will help us again this year. And then I think we'll obviously look at operating budget for going forward, because we're still seeing that pressure. And then finally, I do have just $10,500 for the child care facility interest lost on the grant advance that I would like to add to what we actually did earn, just over $8,800, and that would go towards to the school district who is now managing that project. It's definitely something I would have recommended even if we were managing the project, because that's an area that really did need proper, like, full interest earned on those funds, because that's why the province advances those funds, is so that you can have that little bit of buffer. But having said that, I'd also like just to point out that we did lose a significant amount of interest, and that's on all of our funds, all our reserves funds. And so, when we get to the very end of the year, and whatever we haven't spent, it wouldn't hurt us to supplement and put some of that interest back into those reserves, whatever's left over. But, at a staff level, we just really realized that the initiatives that we use the funds for, were really needed, and so we decided to keep that loss of interest at where it is, but we would recommend using anything left over at the end of the year. And that is what staff is recommending, and so and I can answer any questions. Thank you.
Go around the table. Councillor Sproul, do you have any questions?
No, actually.
Actually, it was a very good report on all what you're using the money for. Councillor Kettler?
Thanks. Yep, I agree with what staff's put forward here. A lot of IT stuff, which I think, COVID funds were meant for. It's certainly on the list of criteria that you have to meet to spend that money. One of the, I really like that we're getting the speed flashers. I think that's really important. The community's been asking for us to invest in traffic calming measures, and that's certainly one that we found that has worked, so that's great to get those. The Lake Park digital sign, is that a purchase or a rental?
It's a rental again. It's just a kind of like a temporary one that's going to go on Sutton again, and we haven't looked into the permanent one. Well, we have looked into it. We haven't been able to bring that one all the way to a decision. There's more complications for that one.
Okay.
So this is just another fix of, and that's where we're going to figure out future uses and see what we can come up with for other budget.
Okay.
Apparently it could have been used this weekend.
Oh, yes,
There was a lot of traffic out there on the weekend.
Yeah.
Parking was
Yes.
way up the hill, almost to that the First Nations, that area up there anyway. I've never seen it like that, packed way up.
And just to remind council, we also are just about, I think this weekend was our first weekend of community patrol, which is also COVID funds, so that'll help too.
Okay. Councillor Kettler, do you want to continue?
Just asking about the possibility of getting a second screen on that wall for the councillors that sit on this side of the. Is that in the budget already, or is that something that we should be looking at?
Rachel's going to talk to you a little bit.
Councillor Kettler, that has been ordered. We're just waiting for it to be to come to us and be installed.
Good.
Okay. And would it be better to come from these funds, or is that
It
was
is
ordered
already.
in one
It's
of
a
the earlier
previous
phases.
commitment.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, we just haven't received it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Councillor Brown?
I think they all got answered. I was hoping the Lake Park sign was a purchase, but I guess we're not quite there yet. So that's okay. I know we talked about signage, and then I know there was a signage conversation with the CBA. So we gave direction to do signage, but then we reallocated that money. And I think given the dramatic uptake in tourist traffic since COVID, additional signage would be great at the entrance to so that we're having issues at every trailhead with cyclists going way too fast, or parking on people's property, or hanging out doing things in different ways. And so I know part of that would be bylaw, but I think just signs saying this is a residential neighborhood, that sort of thing. And then at the entrance at Sutton saying, please slow down. These are, or these are all multi-use trails. Like, we could do some really proactive just management there with some simple signage. And I know we did have that conversation, but I don't remember where it was, and it wasn't on the list now. So hopefully we didn't give that away.
Let me talk to Kaylin about the plans for the wayfinding. I'm pretty sure it won't fit those, but we can. Let me talk about it, and we do have the budget 2023 budget process coming up.
Yeah.
So we can talk about that.
Also, a sign about the potholes would be great. So I don't have to answer that question every time I go on the trail.
What would that sign be?
Just the potholes are up here and there, and there's no swimming allowed.
It's just in Perseverance Creek. It's about
Not,
this big.
not those potholes. Sorry. What I meant to say was the China bowls. I think that's the other name for them.
Yeah.
Perseverance Creek potholes, not the street potholes.
Okay.
Those are
If you
traffic
go
calming.
really fast, you'll fall in a pothole. Some slogan.
Okay.
So maybe with the last report, the final report with the end bits, maybe we can try and find something there.
Okay.
Thank you.
So would someone like to move the motion? And I really don't think you need to read it all out.
So I think the motion is just to allocate the COVID-19 restart funding towards the following initiatives, that big long list, up to 3,250 for a Lake Park digital sign.
10,500 for
Oh, sorry,
the interest lost.
10,500. Yeah, sorry.
Seconder?
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Thank you.
Next, recommend that council receive the emergency pipe replacement report.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Good evening, everyone. I'll be quick. Unlike the exuberant Paul Nash and the exciting wastewater treatment plant and the Thrive grant with the art, I'm here to ask for some money to replace aging infrastructure. And as you can see from the photos, pipes don't last sometimes along in the community. The photos on the second page of the report show a corrugated steel pipe crossing. It was part of the Derwent subdivision, I think, in the 90s. The bottom of the pipe, what you see corroded there is the bottom of the pipe. This was exposed a couple months ago when they were servicing the 4-lot subdivision there on Derwent and Sutton. And so we made a call. At the time, they had asked to section out just the piece they were crossing. We made a call just for them to replace the whole thing. And that's the 11,100 noted in the report. But worse still is the condition of the water main there on Maryport, as you can see on the next page in those photos. So we have an old steel, it's a steel line. It is perforated like I've never seen. This is a pretty bad section of water main. I think it's worse than what we experienced in 2012 when we replaced the main out here in Dunsmuir. Anyways, you can see from the other photo, it's one repair clamp behind the other. And this, if you had asked me 3 or 4 years ago if this was on, within a 5-year scope of replacement, I would have told you it's not, but it has risen to the top based on what we're experiencing as far as repeated repairs and failures to this pipe. So the approximate cost is about $75,000. We won't know until we engage an engineer to do an actual design and put together an engineered estimate. But really, staff is looking for council approval to include this in the 2022 to 2026 financial plan, or the 2022 budget, and direct staff to reflect these projects in a future 2022 to 2026 financial plan bylaw amendment. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from members of council? Yes, Councillor Brown?
I imagine there's more of these.
Well, there are, yeah. This is some of the worst ones. The one on Penrith is also starting to fail between first and second. We've had to do a number of repairs in there, but not to the frequency of this one. So, yeah. I mean, we have a bunch of linear asset projects on the books for design this fall, and there'll be a larger construction tender that we put out in 2023. So again, there's some areas that we know are bad already. This one just kind of crept up to the top of the list fairly quick. So,
Councillor Kettler?
Are there temporary solutions that you could feed inside this pipe until we can actually do a better replacement?
the problem with some of these pipes, especially water mains, is they are full of carbuncles. Like the corrosion is not only on the outside, but some of them are on the inside. So you've got it wouldn't work, like slip lining, fiberglass slip lining, or similar trenchless technologies that used for larger pipes.
Yeah.
Works great if you got a concrete pipe that, where you have solid integrity of the pipe and you have a good alignment. In this case, it wouldn't work well.
Okay.
It's cheaper actually, though. The trenchless technology is pretty expensive. It's cheaper just to dig this one up because it's shallow and replace it.
Is this going to be like really affecting people's water, or actually the pressure, I guess, of their water that they're receiving now?
No pressure when we got to shut it down and repair it every time, but it doesn't affect the pressure. There's just water loss, right? So there's probably leaks that occur, and then until they surface, you don't know they're there. So, but the pressure is typically sustained. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
How long does a pipe usually last?
Well, this pipe's probably maybe installed in the 20s or 30s, old steel line. So, 90 years is pretty good for a steel pipe. We're pushing the limit on some of our infrastructure. New pipes, PVC, I mean, they don't know because, they started installing those in the 60s, late 60s, and I would imagine they'll last 100 years easy, right? So, if not longer, but just depends on the pipe type.
Okay, thank you. Someone like to make the motion?
I'll move that council approve the inclusion of the storm drainage pipe replacement on Sutton Road and the water main pipe replacement on Maryport Street into the 2022 budget, and that council direct staff to reflect these projects in a future 2022-2026 financial plan bylaw amendment.
Second.
Second, all in favor? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Recommend that council receive the 2021 annual report.
Receipt.
Seconder?
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Thank you, Council. Municipalities are required to produce an annual report each year by the Community Charter. The draft annual report for 2021 is here for Council's feedback. The report includes things like an update on municipal services and operations, the status of Council's strategic priorities, and it also includes the annual financial statements for 2021. So, yes, happy to have Council's feedback on the report, any changes or corrections, and then present it to the public. Council also has to give notice, publish notice in the paper, and then bring back the report to a upcoming council meeting to receive any submissions made on the report.
Okay. Questions? Comments? Seeing none, would somebody like to move the report? Or not the report, but move the recommendation.
That council give notice that council will consider the 2021 annual report and submissions and questions from the public at the regular council meeting of July 11th, 2022.
Seconded.
All in favor? Carried. That council receive the 2021 Statement of Financial Information, SOFI report,
Sorry, Mayor Baird, that is the
one that we pulled.
that you removed, and it'll come back.
Yes. Computers are great, but sometimes they don't get it right either. Next, we have that council received the appointment of Deputy Corporate Officer report.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Thank you, Mayor Baird. The village typically appoints a deputy corporate officer just to have some continuity of administration and services when the appointed person is away, and that position is currently vacant. And we're asking council to appoint Andrea Sampson as deputy corporate officer, who would be able to administer oaths and witness signatures for important documents, as well as she would act as cemetery manager to approve cemetery business during my absence. Thank you.
What is your pleasure?
The council appoint Andrea Sampson as deputy corporate officer.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Next, the recommendation that council receive the Island Coastal Economic Trust funding report.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. This is me as a member of the committee. At our last meeting, the North Island Sunshine Coast Regional Advisory Committee was advised that ICE-T, which is short for the Island Coastal Economic Trust, was advised that ICE-T has $4.5 million remaining to commit to new projects. Without a security commitment by the province in its budget in 2023, the trust is in danger of shutting down in early 2023. If the trust is discontinuing, local governments will lose their voice in funding decisions, and the predictable, responsive funding source for shared economic priorities would be lost. ICE-T has submitted a 2023 budget request to recapitalize the ICE-T with at least $150 million to transport the trust from managing a short-term sinking fund that cannot generate sustainable returns into an intergenerational trust that supports and finances coastal communities to achieve our economic priorities for the future. One of the things that we also looked at is in the beginning in 2006, when the trust was started, the Vancouver Island Sunshine Coast received $50 million, and in 2017 we got another $10 million. Meanwhile, the Southern Interior got $401 million. North Central Coast and Interior got $298 million. So we, as the Vancouver Island were really shortchanged in this. And that's why we are at the possibility of shutting down. The others invested them, and the Southern Interior has put in current trust assets of $1,217,000,000. The North Central Coast has $440 million, plus $243 million in additional provincial funds. We have on the island in trust $7.9 million. It's unsustainable. And we have applied for funding through this. It is chaired by all the mayors north of Duncan on Vancouver Island. And actually at the present time, Councillor Kettler sits on the executive committee. We make a lot of decisions and fund a lot of projects in a lot of communities on Vancouver Island that would not otherwise have funding. So what we're asking for is that when we go to UBCM, we lobby the ministers to support the funding to this very, very important committee. So that's what we're asking for. If anybody has any questions or concerns, either myself or Councillor Kettler will answer them. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I agree that it's that ICE-T does very good work, and that these structures are vital for the appropriate economic development and community revitalization on Vancouver Island. But I'm just a bit confused about so the money was given and the money was just spent. It wasn't, in the past, it wasn't actually functioning as a trust, like where you're, as I understand this new funding, or I guess that's my question, the new funding is we take in $150 million. That $150 million is invested and we're spending the profit versus spending down the fund.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the problem before, that we never got to a point
Enough.
where we could invest, because all of that money, because that's what the type of funding is called, a sinking fund, because you're just whittling down the original investment over time, because you never got a big enough capital investment to be able
get
to
the
invest
profits.
it like the other trusts did in BC. They got much bigger investment. They were able to invest it and make way more interest on it, which then goes to the projects as opposed to the original investment going to the projects.
Yeah. So this will actually make it sustainable.
Yes, that's what we're hoping for.
Excellent.
So that's just for information, to let you know that that's what we'll be doing when we have any meetings with the ministers. Myself and Councillor Kettler have already talked to our MLA, Josie Osborne, about this situation. And as a past mayor, she sat on the committee, so she's very well aware of the position we're in. But it takes all of them, a vast majority of them, to support it, the funding request.
Yeah, and the other thing is that with the funding that they have left, they have to start shutting things down if they aren't going to get recapitalized. So basically this next year would be the last year for it. So yeah, so we're really fighting for the trust and for us to be able to have this resource as an island and the coastal communities.
Yeah, and for quite a few years, we've been asking for First Nation representation, and they have not approved that as yet, too, and we're hoping to also have that approved.
That's part of the proposal moving forward.
And do the other trusts have representation?
I'm not aware of, I'm not sure on that
Because
one.
some of them, like Columbia Basin Trust was an industry capture, right? Like not all of them are provincially funded, so that would be interesting if they
Yeah.
were all the same.
That's something I will check into. Let's see, okay. Next, bylaws. 7.1, that council receive the development cost charges expenditure bylaw report.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Okay, this is just a bylaw that I'm recommending council consider the first 3 readings of. So this is to transfer under the current DCC bylaw. I'm recommending transferring $2.5 million from sewer DCCs over to your sewer and water infrastructure renewal reserve to be used for your wastewater upgrade project, which these funds have always been slated for that project. And so now I'm just recommending to transfer it because we're about to come into a new bylaw, and those funds were collected under the old bylaw for this project at that 100%. And then, so what will happen is, those funds will be used for the cash outlays that and anything that's not eligible under the grant, and also for the project's overages if we don't get the grant that Paul is applying for approved. If it all works well, we'll still have some overages to use that with, but there might be some left over, and that would be used to pay down what we've borrowed for interim borrowing. It would be paid down that before we go to long-term debt. And so at this point, I'm not sure what that would be. But yeah, so because normally if we use DCC bylaw, DCC funds, we just need a bylaw to authorize that expenditure. And of course, this isn't in the financial plan bylaw, so I'm just recommending an expenditure bylaw at this point to get that approved earlier.
Any questions? Yes, Councillor Brown?
I'm just still trying to understand the relationship to reserves. So this is money that's coming out of the DCC sewer reserve. Yes, but we have another sewer reserve that's just sewer reserve? No.
Yes, we have a sewer and water infrastructure renewal. It's for the facility. It was established to eventually start reserving funds for the eventual replacement of your water treatment plant, and then the wastewater treatment, which of course we're not there yet. But we have put a little bit of savings in there for the sewer project, but not enough, not nearly enough.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so someone like to make the motion?
The council approved the transfer of $2.5 million from the sewer development cost charges reserve to the sewer and water infrastructure asset renewal reserve for the wastewater upgrade project, and that council directs staff to bring forward an amendment to the adopted 2022 to 2026 financial plan bylaw to reflect this transfer, and that council give first, second, and third reading to the development cost charges reserve expenditure bylaw number 1172 2022.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Thank you.
No news business, notice, motions, and announcements. Public hearing, vacation rentals regulation, July 6, 2022 at 7 p.m. in council chambers, zoning amendment bylaw number 117022. Question period. If you have any questions concerning tonight's agenda, please email info@cumberland.ca using subject line question period.
Did you see the sign at the entrance to camp?
Yes, I did.
So cute, hand painted.
Yeah.
Go.
I know. I would kind of think that we used to have a round circle cement barrier there, and it had no through road right on it, and everybody saw it, and it was only hit a couple of times.
I also heard that, yeah. There is a lot of concern on the street because the boats think they're going to the lake through there, and then they get stuck. And also the new, the end of the road used to be a solid cement barrier, and now it's not. And so motorcycles zip through there.
Oh, okay.
So that's the thing.
Okay.
Wide.
That's concerning as well, because
Okay.
dirt bikes are also motorcycles.
Nothing? Okay. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Have a wonderful night.